Hello, ADA friends. My name is Christine Barber, often referred to as the ADA Lady, and I am here to help you with your digital accessibility efforts. I have over 10 years' experience in ADA remediation and training, and am here to help you make the world a more accessible place. Please note I am an accessibility expert, but I am not a legal advisor. Please always defer to your lawyer or legal representative for specific questions regarding liability and interpretation of the law. Today we are going to talk about alt text for tables, also known as table summaries. A table summary conveys information about the organization of the data in the table and helps users navigate it. For example, if a table has an unusual structure, it is helpful to the user to explain what is being conveyed in the complex tables or rows. I try to avoid doing complex tables, so we are going to look at a couple of examples today on complex tables and maybe how we can fix them and make them better. I know sometimes we don't always have control over the format of tables, and if it has merged or split cells, if it came from like state or federal government, and there's nothing we can really do about the structure of that, we really have to rely on the table summary to tell the users what's going on in the table. So I have a couple of examples for us to review together today. And I also have a couple examples on how I fix those issues and what kind of options we have when we're talking about building accessible tables. In front of us here, we have a bad example of a table, also known as a complex table. So this table has a lot going on with the table structure. We have that title that is merged all the way across. We see this often when it comes to tables, especially for our friends that live in the Excel world. Sometimes they only work in a worksheet, so they have to work in that capacity to make their documents and their tables look attractive and still convey the information. But sometimes that can give us a hard time on the back end when we're trying to tag those tables for accessibility. It is really hard when that table goes right to a PDF format because Adobe Acrobat Pro does not have any table editing capabilities. So we're kind of locked down and stuck with whatever table structure we have. One of my biggest tips for today is to make sure you set your tables up correctly to begin with. This is going to save you a lot of headaches down the road. And what could be an easy 5-minute fix in Excel or Microsoft Word could literally save you 3 hours worth of work on the back end with trying to make a complex table be read and understood by a screen reader. Remember, screen readers are just simple, dumb machines. They're not very complex. So when they see a data set, they just want to see a simple table. They don't want merged cells and empty cells. All of these are really confusing for the reader because the screen reader doesn't know how to read those tables all the time. If it can read the table, it's not going to make a lot of sense and the structure's going to be very hard to follow. And sometimes if the table's just really bad, I've seen where the screen readers will just bomb out. They will not even convey the information that is in that table. Therefore, all the data in that table becomes inaccessible because someone with a screen reader can't access it. We're going to go over some tables today and how to fix those. So again, with this table, we have that title that's merged all the way across. And then we kind of have like the real table headers. I will see this often where this is the actual column header of information that represents the data that's below it. We have the real headers are really on row 2. And here we can see that row 2 is really the subjects of those columns and that representation of that data. Then we have a bunch of data cells here. And then I see this so many times where people will merge all the way across and create a subset of data. Merge all the way across, subset of data. And that really creates a complex table structure. We've gotten so fancy with making tables and making them attractive and pretty, we don't think about them being simple and logical and easy to read. And it's not just for screen readers, it's for visual readers as well. When you have a table that has a lot going on, like this one, it's kind of hard to follow the data flow with it. And they can be really pretty, but doing complex table structures just makes it difficult for everybody to read it. And another thing I see a lot is people here on the last row, you can see they'll put like a special note or maybe like a total for the whole table. So you'll have a total blank, 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 and then like an amount over here. And again, it just really makes a table structure complex. So these are kind of the things that we struggle with typically for tables. So let's go ahead and go to the next one. So here we have a working example of that complex table. So we have the top rated seasonal fruits in Florida. Don't come at me if these are not accurate. I tried to do my best with this information. So these are just examples of fruits that will become available in spring, summer, fall, and winter. And we can see here that I added in that merged all the way across section and the subset of data are fruits that are available all year here in Florida. So we have lemons and limes down there. And I have my little note. All sections are estimates and may vary based on weather conditions. So we have a pretty good write up for what's going on in here. And again, it's just a representation of the complex table that I had up above. So, what are some things that we can do with this table to make it a little easier to read? Here, I have an example of what I would do to fix that table. Here, I simplified the table. I took the title that was merged all the way across and I put that outside of the table. That really is just a titling of the table. It doesn't have anything to do with the data set. I typically pull those descriptors out. And now you can tag this properly as text, which is all it should be. And now we just have what I call the meat and potatoes of the information of the table. Again, this is a normalized table. We have 4 columns. There's data in all 4 of those columns, and we have clear table headers here as well. And I went ahead and actually took out that subsection of data since it wasn't a full set of data to even go with the table. I just put it as plain text on the end, a note for fruits available all year, lemons and limes, and I moved that note outside of the table as well. Again, not part of the data set, not a part of the table structure. I just went ahead and pulled that out as well. And now we have a neat, clean table. And all of this is going to be picked up really easily if we convert this over to a PDF and have to tag it for accessibility on that end. Again, it's a great example on how to simplify your tables, kind of pull out all the messy structure and just leave it with your data set, just the information that you're trying to convey in a table anyway. And now we have our next example here that I have for travel accommodations. So again, sometimes we are just stuck with bad tables. Maybe this table came from an outside organization that I don't have control over and I can't really tell them how to format their tables. Or it came from state or federal government where I can't make them change the formatting of their document. If I want to share this information out, I have the burden of making the information accessible if I want to include it with my data and my information and host it on my website. An alternate to do is if there is a really crazy document that's hard to remediate, you can always link out to those things. Again, if it has a complex structure and you just can't get it to work right, I like to link out to other organizations' information rather than trying to remediate it myself, but I know that doesn't work in all cases. And sometimes we either have to add this information to our own websites or we're bundling it together in a report or maybe even something like an employment package where we have to include documents from various organizations into one to make it easier for our users to use it. So here, again, we are stuck with this bad table and it's got a lot of crazy stuff going on. We have 5 columns and it talks about the accommodations in those columns. And then in the first column, we have the location and the accommodation size. So we can see here that we have a blank cell right here. Then we have this merged all the way across, merged all the way across. And we also have empty data cells, which is another thing that I try to avoid. Let's try to, if we could not touch this table and we are just, no, this is what you're stuck with, Christine, this is what you have to tag. Let's go ahead and do that. So I have a little alt text example I wrote up here. I am just going to go ahead and I am going to copy that. And if you hover over your table, you can see you get these little crosshairs that pop up over here. So I'm going to show you the accessibility tools over here. I like to right click on those crosshairs. And we want to go into this drop down where it says table properties. Going to go ahead and click on table properties, and it's going to open up the table properties window. So this window pops up and there's a couple tabs that we can use here. And you can see that we have a tab here called alt text. It used to have the word summary, and I believe Microsoft Word had updated that. So depending on your version of Word, it might say alt text and it might say summary. And so I'm going to go ahead and click on that tab. You can see here we have two form fields. We have the title and the description. It used to be, and it depends again on what version of Microsoft Word you have, the title tag used to not convey over to Adobe Acrobat Pro. So that was really interesting that it was only the description field gets pulled over to the alt text in Adobe because Adobe only has one field. It only has alt text. It doesn't have title and description. So that was a thing here, and this is a great example of how software is getting better and better for accessibility. This was an issue where those two software programs kind of didn't speak the same language and didn't use the fields the same way. But with working with one another, now both the title and the description pull over to Adobe Acrobat Pro. And you can have this included in your PDF when you convert that over. We can say here, I'm just going to do bad table. And then I'm going to just paste into the description what I had copied there and explains what's going on in this table. So table shows accommodations available for booking. The first column includes location and accommodation size. The rest of the table shows the number of bookings available for that size and location. And if you wanted to set your table headers, this table properties window is where you do that at. And if we go back here and we click on row, this is where you want to be to set your table headers. Right now, I have the entire table highlighted. It says here rows 1 through 9. I don't want to make all the rows a table header. I just want the first one. So I'm going to go and click this button that says next row. And you can see here that it changed in the background, that now just this top row is highlighted. And it is as easy as clicking this button, repeat as header row on the top of each page. So this does a couple nice things for you as well. If this table rolls onto another page, again, another accessibility rule for tables is that you have to have repeated table headers per page. The way the screen readers work is they work per page for tables. So that's why we have to have those repeated table headers. That's one of the accessibility rules for the WCAG. Now that we have this set, if this table rolls over to the next page or multiple pages, these table headers will maintain their look and feel throughout the entire document, no matter how big that table grows and gets. Could be over 50 pages, and it's going to repeat the look and feel of those table headers throughout. And you only have to change them in one spot, which is great for formatting, or if you have to add a block of data, it doesn't matter. Those table headers always remain at the top of the page. So it's a great document formatting tip as well. This is where you want to click on that. We're going to go ahead and click OK. And that is how easy it is to, one, set your table header, and two, add alt text for your table. So, because this table is a little gnarly, and just as an example, I want to show you guys how I would fix that. You can see here I have a table that looks a little bit different, but it has all the same information in it. So if I was allowed to reformat this table and fix it, this is my first option of what I would do. And again, I added this column header. I do not like tables that have missing column or row headers. And again, in Microsoft, you can only set column headers, but in Adobe, you can do column and row headers. This box is probably one of the most crucial ones in tables, and people leave it blank a lot, and it's very disappointing because this is the best and most informative information you could possibly have is that first cell in a table. So even if you went with column headers or row headers, you don't want to leave that information blank. One of the functionality items of screen readers is that the reason why we set these table headers is because it repeats the table header as it's parsing through the data. So if we were on row one, it would tell you the column headers, location size, apartment, tiny home, cabin, house. And then when you get to row two, it's going to repeat that information. Location size, room, one bedroom, apartment, five, tiny home, three, cabin, one, house, zero. Again, a 9-row table, not that big a deal, but think about really large documents that convey lots of information. One example I like to use is budget documents for government or for organizations. They are just rows and rows and rows and rows in tables. And if I was on row 20 and this thing was just spitting out numbers, I would have no idea where I was in the table if I didn't have a table header. And that's why our table headers are so crucial to set, and that's why I do not ever like leaving that very important column and or row header empty. So even if you went, if you went with column headers, it should be there, or if you went with row headers, it should be there. And so I added that information in there. I removed those subcategories that merged all the way across the Rome and the Paris and just added that information right in line with the accommodation size. Now instead of Rome, one bedroom, two bedroom, three bedroom, Paris, one bedroom, two bedroom, three bedroom. Now we just include the location in there. Rome, one bedroom, Rome, two bedroom, Rome, three bedroom. And again, the same thing for Paris. We are still conveying the information. We're doing it in a very inclusive way and a very clear way that explains what the location and size are together in a single cell. I also took the time to go through and everywhere there was blank cells, I added a zero value. Again, tables are very tricky, and Adobe Acrobat Pro has gotten okay at reading tables from other software. It is not the best, and the more you have kind of blank cells, Adobe doesn't always attribute a value to that cell when it comes over to a PDF. What happens is you'll end up getting a table error here because every single zero value that was in the old table, let me show you that again. Here's the old table with a bunch of the empty values in it. So even if we left those blank in our new table, let's go back there, we would possibly get where Adobe's going to read that we only have this many cells in row two. And if we didn't have anything there for Adobe to kind of anchor to make that cell information, it may drop it off. And now all of a sudden it thinks that you only have 4 columns in your 5-column table. It's going to throw that table regularity error in Adobe Acrobat Pro. Again, you can see here, I filled out the zero values. So this table now has all the data complete and filled out in it. Maybe it's not always numbers that you're working with. If it's text, sometimes I'll just do N/A in the cell, just so again, Adobe has something to anchor to. There is some kind of text in there. You can use dashes, and I have seen where people will just use a dash in the cell like that. I'm not a big fan of that because some screen readers, the way they are set by default, don't read those kind of grammar characters. So it's just going to skip over the cell. Although you won't get an error on it, it's not going to be very clear that you don't have any tiny homes available in Paris that have 3 bedrooms. It's just going to skip over the information. It's going to say the title and then say nothing afterwards. So again, I like to be super comprehensive and make sure I have all the information in there. And again, if you're doing text, I will just do this in cell, the N/A, so non-applicable for any information, or even like the word none. Depending how your table's set up and what you can work with, you can use some of those options in your table to kind of normalize it and get it to where it makes sense. Again, not just to screen readers, but visually looking at this table, it's a lot easier to read than the other one. So this is an alternate version of fixing the table. And I broke it up into 2 separate tables. We kind of had 2 data sets in that original table. I'm going to flip back to it real quick. And you can see here that we really had 2 data sets. We had the Rome and we had the Paris. Why not make 2 tables? You're totally capable of doing that if you're able to reformat them to where they make the most sense to your reader. So let's flip back to the one I fixed. And we can see here, again, I split that up. I put clear titles on them, Rome accommodations available and Paris accommodations available. And now for this first crux in the cells, that first cell, that is the first column and row header, I just had to put the word size in each of those because we already pulled the location out. It's in a separate section. So we can just say size here because we are just talking about the bedroom sizes now. And so you can see here, my edits are that I broke the data up to 2 separate tables. I added that column header in here that says size. And I added zeros again where there are no accommodations available for these two. So again, these are just some options that you can do for your tables when you kind of re-look at them and reassess the data as to, well, what can I do to make this table better? What suggestions maybe I could make to my design department? Because I know not everybody gets accessibility training or has to make documents accessible. And sometimes we train each other, and you can say, hey, you can really save me a lot of time on the back end if you make your tables this way. So, training each other and sharing this information can be super helpful so that when you are getting things from your design team or your information team, that they are formatting them correctly for the most efficient use of time for remediating and making things accessible and making the data simple for everyone to understand. Just wanted to thank everybody for watching, and I really like being able to teach you guys about accessibility and teaching you these tips and tricks on how to make your content more accessible. So please feel free to give me a like and subscribe for more accessibility content. If there is anything that you liked in the video, please put a comment down below so I know what kind of content people are enjoying, or if you have a suggestion for content, maybe there's something in the accessibility world that you're struggling with and you would love to see a little tutorial on it, I would be happy to go ahead and assist you with that. I love hearing from viewers. So please don't be shy. Put some comments down below and let me know what I could assist you with in the future. Thank you so much, ADA friends. I hope to see you in the next video.